XYL, Kathy Priankos from Fort Smith.
Hey, Ron, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gee whiz, I've really been looking forward to this, and I appreciate this warm welcome very much. We're really glad to be here. Kathy, sitting back here, is my navigator and pilot tonight. Thank you, dear. This is going to kind of be a continuum. I understand there's a lot of people here in the room that aren't into DX, but maybe you're just sort of starting. Well, that's my passion, and I'm going to try to explain to you why and how this has evolved over 60 years of being on the air. And it's been a thrill and a learning experience every single day. And let me start by just right at the beginning. And this is the one I started in 1955, with a Heath AT1 transmitter that my Elmer, W5UQ now, W5UQ, that call will come up a little bit more. He helped me, and so here I'm at my little humble station, and I don't have a receiver, so those of you who are technical, you'll understand what I'm saying, but at the time I had no idea how this worked. On my right over there, on the very right of the picture, is a Zenith floor model, and then that's a Sears Silvertone 1946 vintage receiver up on the left with the little bronze dial. Well, beating those two together right close to the same frequency resulted in an oscillation because there was no BFO in this old Silvertone. So I was able to get a tone and copy CW, miracle of miracles. So I'm on my new novice station, I'm talking to Texas, talking to Missouri, I'm talking to North Carolina every now and then, but no, nothing of any other note. But someone said, well, you know, it's at early in the morning, it's very quiet. So you don't hear a lot of this noise that you hear. And those of you who have been around a long time, you'll understand when you've got a 13 kc bandwidth, you don't have a lot of selectivity. So all the signals just come in like this, and it's difficult to make any contacts. Well, one morning as I woke up at 2:30 in the morning, I said, gee whiz, what will it be like this morning? All of a sudden it's quiet, there's not a lot of noise, and I hear these whisper signals coming through in my trusty Silvertone. I'm 13 years old, and the thrill of hearing a novice from Honolulu, Hawaii, absolutely floored me. What really floored me is when he came back to me. That was it. I made my first contact. A few times later, a few mornings later, Tipuc on the northern island of New Zealand, I worked as a novice. Let me tell you, folks, it just can't be any more thrilling than that. Unless you're at Fernando de Noronha, east of Recife, Brazil, working the 160-meter contest, and you work EY8MM, and he says you're 20 over 9 at 8 o'clock in the morning on 160. So let's move on. I've got so much to say, and I'm going to try to keep it rolling. Well, a friend of mine said, why don't you bring your radio and let's go on a vacation someplace? I said, can you do that? And so off we went to St. Martin in 1972, where I operated a little Drake radio, and the fever really bit because hearing Russia down there was a lot different than hearing Russia in Arkansas back in '72. Then it was on a boat and working QRP here. Here I'm working QRP at Jost Van Dyke Island in the British Virgin Islands, running a Heathkit HW8. That was my first QRP. So we're talking over to Sweden and a couple of G stations in England. So that was a real thrill. And then I got my new call of W5SJ, and this is my Elmer up here. This is Bob, W5UQ. He'd never been on a DXpedition, so I said, let's do one together. You helped me get into this hobby. Let's do one together. So off we went to Anguilla and operated from there. And then I was at Bermuda on a holiday, and took my little, I don't know if you can see this well, this is what they call a Pooch motorcycle. It's just a little kind of a little runabout, but it had a little 6-volt battery, a 12-volt battery in it. So I powered my little radio here, strung a wire up in this thing, and I'm out here by the water, and I also worked some DX with that, working about 5 watts. So that was fun. ZF2SJ was my first call at Grand Cayman, and I also operated at Little Cayman, just a few miles away. Let's see how we go. So I've had more calls, of course, and this is a few of the folks that I've met along the way. Here we are operating from from Anguilla, and that's my friend Bob, W5UQ. And the VP2EE, that's Dorothea up here. So various and sundry calls. There's somebody you might know. He helped me get to the airport, and I spent the night with San before I went to Fernando de Noronha. And this was the first time I'd operated at a really super station. And this is the little island, the archipelago of east about 300 miles of San Recife, the easternmost point of Brazil. So worked a lot of stations there and came in, I guess, 12th in the world in the 160 contest. And then I also worked a 6-meter contest from VP5 from Providenciales in the Grand Turks and Caicos Islands. So that was big fun. So I went off to with San and again with my Elmer Bob, and we were on the air from Belize, and San being the comedian, of course, was a big part of that. Then I was again Maritime Mobile and operating from a little 30-foot cruiser a couple of years ago in the BVI with my longtime friend K5KQI. Then on QRP again, a little 1-watt station from St. Lucia a couple of years ago. Kathy and I had our anniversary, and I promised her I'd operate very little on the radio, that we'd spend more time hanging out on this beautiful island in St. Lucia. So I did as I promised, but this was an experience that was very similar to my first night working Hawaii. With 1 watt and a very simple vertical antenna, I'm calling CQ on 20-meter CW, and as I recall, I worked a JA from Japan, and I'm running 1 watt. And then after I finished with him, I get a call from India. And I don't know if it was long path or short path, who knows at that point, but there he was. But as you can see, I'm pretty tickled about it. These are some of the people I've met along the way. Let's see, there's some familiar people right there. That's at their Fort Smith QTH for Jay and Kathy. And here's the San at my home many years ago. And this is John DeVolder, ON4UN, who we became friends when he came down to visit us in Texas, and a longtime friend in Fort Smith, Tom, W5JM. There's Wayne Mills. I was introducing him at a Lone Star DX Association function where I was president for years, and of course that's Marty Lane, OH2BH, a couple of years ago at National Convention. This is my friend Lynn Schreiner, who moved here to Bella Vista from Texas several years ago, put up a huge contest station, and then he passed away. He was a dear friend, and I really miss him. He was a great guy. That's Lynn, and then this is Tim K5 RA, who is a passionate DXer, but his real passion is playing with towers. He loves to go on towers, so believe me, I took advantage of that when he came up to see me. And this was the first, when we moved back to Fort Smith, I'm going to go quickly here, try to anyway. We moved away for 10 years to Florida, where we built a business. And then we came back and put up a little tower and put up a Tenadyne T10, and Tim came up and fixed it up for us. So that's the first time I had a rather large antenna on a pretty small tower, as a matter of fact. And then this is the operating position that I had when we had a little rent house down in Florida, right, as you can see, we're right on the water, and that was a little bitty vertical antenna I had out there, but a very modest setup, so I worked very little DX. We were busy building the business. Some of you know how that is. Work comes first. But then this was a time when we were renting a little place that we always wanted to rent a place actually on the Gulf of Mexico. We're in the Tampa Bay area is where this is. And I'm going to see if I can get the audio for you, because this is what DX is all about. It may take a second. There we go. Well, here it is on the 6th of May at 2310 Zulu from beautiful Reddington Beach. Here is the apex of my incredible antenna, a 21 megahertz dipole inverted L. And here is the driven element. Maybe you can see. I couldn't see it because the viewfinder was blinding me. That's what. Let's see, can you see? There's the wire, and there's going down to, I've got it around a piece of tape, and that's the driven element, and I've just worked Yemen 706 Tango. Now, here's the ground side of the dipole, or the inverted L, and it goes over here to a mop handle. And of course, here's Mexico. And then here's the feed line going into the shack. And we'll step over and take a look at the shack. It's pretty rustic right now, but I mean, there's not a lot to it. Going through the door, and here it is. And pretty good signal for an old lash up, isn't it? Not bad. Anyway, that's it. I've worked them all. Number 1 DXCC. Yay! It thrilled me. I now have 372 countries, and that has a lot of deleted. So for those of you who don't understand, we had countries that came on, and then for some reason or another, under their criteria, they were deleted. So it's just a function of age, folks. The longer you're around, the more countries you're going to work through persistence, luck, and sometimes a little more than that. Just to show you this last couple of years, I put up a rather large antenna. I knew I didn't have a lot of space, I didn't have a lot of time, but I figured that the low bands were going to be better. So I put up a tri-bander, not the 10, 15, 20 that you typically see, but a 40, 17, and 20. But it's a much larger antenna, as you can see from looking just in the backyard, what it took up.
Bill,
yes. Oh, I better get the mic back, yeah. Anyway, did you hear what I said? Hopefully. Anyway, this is what it looks like up in the air, and then I have a little 6-meter antenna on top of that has been fun to work with. But because I'm working it on 40, I wanted to bring up something that a lot of you who have big gain antennas on this band, it's no great phenomenon, but for me, it was a big deal when I had the big 40-meter beam at 4:30 in the afternoon pointed southeast. Well, normally you'd say, well, okay, that must be South America and that sort of thing. Well, all of a sudden I hear this guy coming through. It's Jim, 9V1YC, and he's in Singapore on the northeast-west side of the world, from us anyway. So I'm working him long path, the long way around the world, going up and around and over to Singapore. So that's the phenomenon called long path, for those of you who are not familiar with it, but it was a real thrill. And here's the really crazy things about it. I know that Kevin works a lot of remote, and a lot of you probably do remote, but Jim, 9V1YC, was operating his station in Singapore from Orlando, Florida. Go figure. So it's through the modern part of technology, I suppose. But as you can see here, like around noontime, or 6 o'clock in the morning our time, 6, 7, was working into short path into Russia on 40. And then there's Algeria right there at about 4:30, 4:45 in the afternoon. And then Greece here the same day I worked Jim. I forget what E7 is. And then into southern Sudan at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So anyway, it's just a lot of fun to see the different band conditions as things are, as the sunspot continues to go down. I still play with radios that glow in the dark. This is my old AM station right here, a 75.4 A4 and Ranger. And I have a pair of twins. Remember these, Stan? I think you had a pair of these. And then use that a lot. And then this is my shack now, so or the dungeon as I call it. Every now and then Kathy banishes me to the dungeon, and then that's the station as it exists now. I have a 7600 and lots of computers so I can look and see spotting networks and so forth, logging. And then this is my SPE 1.5. That's a fabulous little box, linear that tracks along with the transceiver, and then I use wire antennas and use them through the AT4K tuner for 80 and 160. The next time you'll see me will probably be when you come to Dayton. I'm helping my Elmer, the same guy that started me in this radio business 61 years ago. That's Bob, W5UQ, now the exclusive distributor for these SPE linears throughout North and South America. And then the guy that owns the company and designed these brilliant little boxes is Gianfranco, and that's where he is, and that's yours truly, and one of our technicians. And so I'll be helping him again at Dayton. I'm a non-paid volunteer, but I just wanted to help my Elmer in his venture here. And so next I'm going to take a real quick trip to TX5T. I was invited to join these guys to go to French Polynesia, and that's something I'd never done before, is go with a group who were really serious. This has always been holiday, just kind of casual stuff for me, just never really that serious. For example, I'll give you another example of how lazy I am. I went to Grand Cayman in, I guess it's been 2 years ago, and to operate the 160 contest in January, because Stan Stockton was not going to go that year. The year before, he built an antenna and for 160 meters, and he won the world. Won the world. He wasn't 12th like I was at one time. He won the world. And so the following year, I get on there, and I wasn't quite as aggressive, and I'm certainly not as talented, and I did about half his score. So I don't even think I was in the top 20. But this time, we were very serious. So we made 16,000 contacts in 7 days, and a lot of people have done more than that. But we had our share of problems. But there was no slacking off. We were for me, I'm not that fast, but I approached 200 contacts an hour rate several times. So and a couple of these guys are in the 225, 230 range. Kevin, what's your top range you've ever done? 250. See, there's a real contester for you, and a world-class WRTC operator too. But anyway, this is Bob Alphen. He's a friend of mine I've known now for 20 years. Bob has been on probably 70 DXpeditions, and many of them in the top 10. So he was K4UEE. He was a real fun guy to be with, and he was my roomie down here. And this is Madison. He was the W5MJ. He was our in charge of the crew. And this was Dr. Bob, W5RF. Glad he was along for a lot of reasons. K5PI Rob, and then yours truly. Now I'm not that short, and he's not that tall, but we're standing on the beach, and it's going that way. So there's other pictures that look. I'm short, but I'm not that short. I think this is it for me. So we'll go into this next presentation. But there we are. We operated Elecraft, and let me change. If anybody wants to take a break, now's the time, and then I'll have about another 15 minutes, and we'll wrap this up with some questions. Okay? There's the group. See, we're a little taller when they put me on the top side there, because the beach is still going down that way. But instead of taking a 1-watt radio, we took a bunch of stuff, because it takes a lot to operate a full-fledged operation like this. So we had 248 items, 5 radios, 3 amps, 11 antennas, lots of coax, 1,000 feet of coax, most of which was connected by Jay Bromley, W5JAY, who helped me put it all together one day. So here's where we went. We went to We flew down to Tahiti, and then one day we took off and flew to fly down here. We couldn't make it because it was raining. We ended up here. We went back, spent one day, went over here to Moorea, did some sightseeing on Tahiti, finally got to Reaveva. And that's how it all took. Instead of 9 days, we only had 7 days to operate. But let me run through these quickly and give you an idea of what we did. We did have a couple of days at Tahiti, which is FO, so I got to operate from Vista, Polynesia, mostly FT8. And we had the craziest antenna that was designed by some guys in Austin, but it worked. But we had very little contact, and we went over to Moorea, and some of you have seen these kind of places in travel logs and so forth. And this was Captain Cook Bay, where Captain Cook discovered Tahiti, and absolutely gorgeous place. So the next day we took off. Here we go. We're finally going to get going. So we get to Tubuai, this little island where it was raining so hard the weather was stinko, and so we're all giving it thumbs down and saying, not going to make it. The pilot said he's not going to go on. We were 30 minutes away from being able to get on the air. So we went back and took a day to sightsee in Tahiti. So there we are having a big time. And then the next day we finally were at the airport with all our stuff, and we're ready to take off. The ubiquitous McDonald's are everywhere. So come as you are. Can you imagine going to your Springdale or Rogers in this garb? But that's the way it was done. That was our mode of transportation. We landed in Reaveva, 900 inhabitants, 7 square miles. It's very small, surrounded by an atoll. So here's what it looks like. And this is the airstrip. And we were located on this side of the island right here. International Airport. Our friends to welcome us with the traditional leis. And this was the QTH for the stations. We're right on the beach in this little small village that was more or less owned by our hosts. Great food. They served us every day, 3 meals a day. They were kind of staggered because some of us were sleeping. I remember going in one afternoon and saying, "What's for breakfast?" And they said, "Bill, it's 7:30 at night." So I got really confused about, when you're operating in shifts and so forth, you don't know where you are. A beautiful little church. We had our Walmart. And then we had a beautiful beach that was deserted, a great spot for us to put our antennas. So let's put up some antennas. We had the switchable vertical dipole arrays for 10 through 20. They're center fed with no radials. I'll show you how they work if some of you don't know. We did not use the optional second element. We figured we're right on the beach. And when we put them up, they were so quiet, it was just amazing. So here's all our junk ready to go. And there's Bob K4UEE and yours truly putting together the verticals. Here's what they look like going up on the beach by the church. And here's the 20-meter array, I say, just one vertical. And then there was another spot about 150 feet away, farthest point, kind of up on a little ridge overlooking the water. And that's where I stuck the 10-meter antenna, and that's literally stuck it to the side of the tree. So then we used ground planes for 30 and 40 meters with elevated radials. I don't know if you can see them right along there. And then we put, guards to make sure that people wouldn't crash into them during the night. But they're just on spider poles with little tiny wire, and then we would tune it. I'll show you how we did that here in just a second with the 180 and with 160 and 80 meter antennas. So we do it in inverted L's with 2 elevated radials for the, on the 160 meters. We had 9 80-foot radials. And we had 2 sets of guys, and this thing was a real monster. But there's the 80, and then here's the 160. So it was about 60 feet tall, and then the inverted L would come over back toward the photographer here. And then that's me. I'm out in the water pulling the radials around to balance them out around the base of the antenna. So there I am being the sacrificial swimmer. But an interesting thing about those, if you have tuned antennas, We had a MFJ little antenna tuner there. Here's where everything came together. So to get a really, really, really good match, we just would wind or take off additional pieces of wire here until we could get it to match just absolutely perfectly at the base. So there we are with our masterpiece, and it worked pretty darn good. Anybody here worked me on Orcason 160? Okay, a couple of the guys in Fort Smith did, and then Joel W5ZN, he worked us, and probably about 600 contacts. And for summertime, we were pretty pleased with that. We thought that was pretty good stuff, and especially since we were the first FT8 on a major DXpedition on 160 ever. You see, we had a beautiful view of the sunrise every morning from the 160 antenna. So 3 stations, 3 bands each. We had a daytime band, a nighttime band, and then we could combine for some of them. We had to swap the bandpass filters. We had very little problem with intermod between the two. We had 3 Elecraft KX3s. They were lent to us by Elecraft, and then we had 3 of the Expert 1.3 KFA, and we ran usually only about 500 watts, mostly because that's about all the capacity we'd take from our local folks there. But anyway, that's what one of the operating positions looked like. I don't know if I put it on this slide. There's Bob and Robert operating side by side. Now, you can see the 2 displays we have. We've got one over here and one over here. A couple of times when everybody else was sleeping, I did this, and I know Robert did it also one time. We put one of those on 17 meters and one on 20 meters FT8, and it was like playing a piano. We were the fox, and in the fox and hound mode, so we could get over here. I could start one and start the other, and we were working probably about 10 stations a minute that way. So that was a lot of fun with the FT8, the new mode. But and there's Bob and I operating. I'm on 40 sideband. I think we operated 70 hours before we ever hooked up a mic. So somebody asked me a minute ago, "Did you work some? Is this all CW?" I'm a CW guy, and most of us on this expedition were. But they said, "Okay, you want to be the grinder?" And I didn't know what that meant in DXpedition, but apparently it's pretty tough, and it is if you're at 40 meters on one of these bands and you're trying to operate and handle a pileup. It was a grinding, but it was fun. What the heck? There's Bob. Listen to his comment. Well, thank you, Bob. And then we had the thing I didn't realize. We were pretty far south, and it's August, but it's about 55 degrees. So we were closer to the Arctic Circle than we were to the equator. So I got kind of cold. But there we are, some more of our operation. We use K6TU propagation as a service to let us know, give us a hint when the bands were going to be open, so where we should position ourselves. There's Bob Madison operating FT8. And we worked up a magical chart, and this is what we used so we could figure out on 12 meters the optimum time to work W6s, JAs, and so forth. So you just the red would be the hottest time, and the green would be the weakest time. So we could plan our propagation and optimize our operation that way. The Elecrafts were great. They ran about 7 or 8 watts, and we were able to drive those linears up to 400 and 500 watts. So pretty exciting. Here's where I worked K5JUC, Jim in Fort Smith on FT8. This will give you an idea of the terrible conditions we're in. 10 meters was very limited. Of course, it was summertime. 20 meters was our workhorse. We did really well. Could have done more on 30, but we just didn't concentrate. We really should have done it more. The sunrises were just absolutely amazing on 40, and the same thing for 80. And then we worked hard to get almost 600 contacts with 17 countries on 160. Yes, 73% of it was on CW. 16% of it was on FT8, and 70 hours before we plugged in a mic. North America was by far the tops. Asia was number 2, and we were very pleased to work into Europe, because if you think of it where we were way in the South Pacific, it's almost, what's the word, antipodal? It's almost exactly opposite of where we were on the earth to work into Europe. So that's the way that was. So we want to thank all the folks that helped us. There were lots of people that helped us. You know, this was all our own hook, but the freight was pretty expensive to get all this stuff going and coming. So and there we are in all our splendor with our 160-meter contact. It was a lot of fun. They're talking about doing something else this summer. Most of you know this guy was on the Bouvet DXpedition that they spent like 40 days in very rough seas trying to get to Bouvet Island, and they failed. They got there, and then they had engine failure, and they could not make landfall. So I was talking to Bob this week, and I said, well, what do you think? You want to try another one? He says, well, these guys are all talking about stuff where you have to take a boat trip. If I have to be on a boat, I'm not going. So, and since he's done about 100 of these DXpeditions, I don't blame him. And I think Kathy would want me to do the same thing. So once again, there's Ravavia, our landing strip, and we were over here somewhere around in there. So, can I answer any questions? I think it's been about 35, 40 minutes, so I'm just blabbing on here. So, I want to thank you again. This has been a real pleasure to be here. Yes, sir.
Did you ever meet Danny Wheel, that VP5 Victor Baker?
Only the stories. I mean, he's been gone a long time. I think he was living in Austin at one time. In a nursing home, and I never met Danny. I don't think I ever even heard him. I mean, he was on the air in the late 50s, early 60s, and some way, I mean, I didn't really get my antennas going until the mid 60s. It was just wires and that old beat up Silvertone. So he was a good guy. He sailed a boat all over the Caribbean and put on islands for the first time. Danny Wild. Yeah, he's a famed DXer. Anybody else? I'd love to answer some questions. Really pleased to have Stan and his son Kevin here. Their reputation of DXers is well known worldwide. So as contesters particularly. So I'm honored that you guys are here. Yes, sir, Kevin.
Did you guys know, I'm assuming you contacted the hotel people ahead of time that you stayed at and let them know you were going to show up with all this radio gear, or how did that?
I meant to say something about that, Kevin. I cut out a lot of the slides for this presentation because I had all this other jazz going. But these guys had been here before. They went last year. And so this year we left about 800 feet of cable rather than ship it all the way home. And said, so if you want to let somebody else know, so this will help maybe as some incentive for you to have other operators come, 60 or 70, 80 pounds is already here of coax. So they can use it. So they were very, very hospitable. Like I say, they understood exactly what we were doing and the fact that we were going to be sleeping very little and in shifts, and it was really crazy. But we were really pleased to be able to get on there and have, amazingly, so those of you who do pile-ups, let me just take a note to say about the courtesy effort. The people, I've done this before when I've operated from Cayman, for example. It's not a big deal to be operating from Cayman because we're all pretty common down there now. But so normally, you don't have to ask people to stand by. But if we understood that the Europe conditions were there, we wanted to optimize the opportunity for those people in Italy to talk to us. So we'd say, okay, Japan, stand by. Because believe me, at any time of the day or night, the Japan stations were there. You didn't have to worry about getting them. They were there. They'd find you. But they were all loud, and there were a lot of them. So and I remember particularly being afraid, look, I know these guys are not going to get it. Well, believe me, I couldn't believe it, but they did. If I'd say stand by, Europe only, EU only, all of a sudden, the weak signals came through and you could hear the guys coming in through England. And the same thing for the U.S. station. That really surprised me. If we were asking the USA, stand by, or if we go to the JA and say North America only, they'd shut up. I was really surprised. Have you found that to be true? Those of you who've done this before?
I concur with that for the JAs. I wouldn't say that so much for the US.
Okay, well, you know what I mean, Stan.
JAs are very
I was flabbergasted. I didn't expect them. I will say this, that they want to make sure you get your call letter. If you want to ruin your rate, run a JA run and say question mark one time. That's the wrong thing to do, I found out. Just go through it and keep going and correct it later. Anybody else?
Bill?
Yes, sir.
What were some surprises? You've operated from a number of different locations, what, maybe 20, 25?
About 20 or so.
All right, so what were the surprises to you operating from the South Pacific?
Well, I'd never been there, that's for sure, so I was a little surprised at some of the conditions and the fact that we were able to get to Europe with just simple vertical antennas. It was, of course, very quiet down there. There's no man-generated noise. So, and the only thing we're generating is maybe interfering with each other a little bit. I guess that's the main thing. I was just thrilled with the fact that it was so quiet. A lot different than being in Fort Smith, Arkansas. It's awful noisy around here, isn't it, guys? Yes, sir, Stan.
Was the power 220 or 110?
It was 110. Yeah. These little SPE linears run really nicely on 110. It's amazing.
Are there any locals in the South Pacific?
There's a few. There's a couple on Fiji. We did not see any antennas on Tahiti. And we circumvented the island one day on a tour, and I said, we're going to find somebody with antennas. So there's 5 hams in the car. We're all looking around to see if there's any beams anywhere, but nah, we didn't see them. Stan?
Which direction was the water? Like, where did you have a clear water shot versus going back over land?
We were basically northeast, northwest. So we had a full 140 degrees.
Which included JA and North America?
Yeah, I could have had my map up there. That gets JA, North America, and a straight shot right over USA to Europe. So we were happy to get some South American stations because we were going through a huge mountain to get there. But
What I found is that the verticals that I put up down there, I've got a clear water shot from, I don't know, maybe New Zealand to Northern Europe, or the middle part of Europe at best. And it's wonderful. I mean, a vertical right next to the water is as good as it gets.
it's amazing.
You go the other way across land, awful,
Mhm.
awful. Like I put up a Yagi antenna when I was down there last, and to South Africa or someplace like that, the Yagi is like 3 or 4 echelons better, at least.
Yeah.
20 dB better. Because it's
We would love to have had a Yagi down there and we thought about taking a 6-meter antenna so we could even try FT8 on 6 meters, and I think we would have been surprised. We would have made some contacts, but we just ran out of room and want to, I think. So, anything else?
Any surprises other than what you just mentioned?
Well, the big surprise was we thought if we could make it as far as Tubuai, which was 2 hours of chaotic rain and storm and everything else, surely he'd take us another 25-minute hop to get us where we wanted to go. Instead, he chose to go all the way back through another 2 hours to get back to Tahiti, and so we had the same weather conditions. So I thought, take us where we want to go, and then stop and wait till the weather gets going, and then you go back to Tahiti. That really surprised us, and it really messed us up for 2 days. So you can imagine how we scurried to get those antennas up. I mean, literally, Bob, K5PI, was in networking the radios, getting everything up, while Bob and I built them, and the 2 other guys put them up. So, it was a good team effort, and we were able to get on the air literally in hours, so because we were so far behind. But I'm just trying to think of any real surprises. No, that was it. Biggest surprise I've had is when I had 1 watt on St. Lucia and India called me. That's the biggest surprise I've ever had, or working New Zealand on the novice band.
You had good
Really, yes, it was fine. I mean, we didn't really drive the linears because I didn't want to pull more than about 15, 16 amps because we just didn't want to, number one, we didn't want to test the amplifiers. I think they would have been fine, and no telling what our signal would have been on 160 if we'd been able to run 1,500 watts instead of 400 or 500. I think it would have really helped us.
Was the power centralized or just localized to that area?
Well, they have gas, they have oiled generators, gas and oil generators for this little population of 900, and that's it. So we didn't want them to run out of fuel. So
You want to dim the lights in the town?
we didn't want to dim the lights of the town, no.
Did you ever get in a situation where you felt threatened by pirates or thieves or anybody? I've heard Stan talk about some of that in certain areas on these islands, like Sri Lanka.
Yeah, there's this place on North 6th in Fort Smith that, that's usually where I feel pretty threatened. But seriously, no. Everywhere I've been has been really very civilized. I know Sam's been in the Sudan where they had people with machine guns at the door. Sometimes I wonder how he made it through all of that stuff, because he's put new countries on the air. I was hoping he'd be here tonight. I've known Sam for about 59 of the 61 years I've been on the air. So he said he had a doctor's appointment, couldn't make it. Yes, sir, Jay.
What was Bob UEE's reaction when you all weren't able to land after the Bouvet thing? Did he feel like he was being jinxed?
Yes, he said, I don't want any one of you to say a word. Nobody say a word. And, but we did. So you did it. So he really felt terrible about Bouvet. When I talked to him the other day, he's still working on doing the refunds to the maximum he can, even down to the individual donors that gave money to Bouvet. They're going to try to get something back to every one of us who gave them money, including the big clubs. So I don't exactly know how they do it, but K5KQI, the guy I went to the BVI with, has been his treasurer of all his DXpeditions and was treasurer for the Lone Star DX Association. They're working feverishly to try to figure out a way to get people money back. So he said that, again, he said, I know you guys are thinking I'm jinxing this thing, but when we had to stop, but it was, that's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that, Jay. Jay, by the way, has been QSL manager for me for probably 15 years on all of these exploits, and I told him he was relieved of duty. Anywhere I go from now on, I'm going to take care of him myself, and I really appreciate you, Jay, for all you've done all these years. It's been great. And this is a great club. How many of us are new DXers here? I wanted to, are interested, have not worked DX and you want to work it. Okay. Well, great. You got Ron here to mentor you for that, and Jay and of course Stan Ross here. He's been working DX for years, so you got some members of the club that understand it and can help you, because it can get confusing, and running split and all this other stuff takes some getting used to.
Bill, in closing, where do you want to go next, and where would you not want to go back to?
None of those places. I mean, I wouldn't mind going back to any place I've ever been. Mostly I've been to the Caribbean, but I did operate in Japan when I was a kid. That was another part of the story, I suppose. But I think Bob often mentioned to me the other day, it's nothing rare, but it's more in keeping with what us old guys should be doing now. And that's going to civilized places that are easy to get by on an airplane. And one of them is Grenada. There's a contest station down there, or a DX station, that has a lot of towers and antennas, but they have not been on the air because I think the guy who's in charge of it, I think he's passed on. So Bob said, we ought to take a research team down there and just look and see if there's some possibilities that it would be a station we could rev back up. And Grenada's very civilized. They have hot meals and showers and hotels and all that stuff. So very, very comfortable. And by the way, our host, our accommodations were very comfortable. And like I said, it was cool at night, and great meals and great weather. But no place. So I think Grenada is one, but the other guys are talking about doing something again out in the Pacific, which is a long plane ride. And I don't know. We'll see. Thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it.